Picture this: a boy nobody respects gets handed the most terrifying nickname in the Empire, and he spends the entire time trying to run from it. Because the Dark Mage everyone worships as a legendary hero is secretly a 15-year-old kid who just wants his autograph collection and a nap. This world wasn't always crawling with monsters. A long time ago, a human king made one reckless choice, and he tore open a gate connecting his world to another. On the other side waited a realm packed wall-to-wall with demons. The second that gate cracked open, those creatures poured through, and humanity's peaceful little kingdom turned into a slaughterhouse overnight. People died by the thousands, and the dirt under their feet turned red with blood. So the king did the only thing he could think of. He got on his knees and begged whatever was listening for a miracle, and something answered. A blinding light dropped out of the sky, and every monster caught underneath it dissolved into black smoke. Some people got marked by that light, and suddenly they could fight back with actual magic. The world called them magicians, treated them like living saints, and peace came crawling back. But here's the question nobody in this story ever really answers. Was that light really some divine savior stepping in to help, or was it something else entirely, wearing a very convincing disguise? Keep that question in your back pocket, because it's going to matter a lot more than you think. Fast forward to a glittering noble ball, string music, expensive wine, the whole aristocratic circus. A famous singer named Serene stands backstage, bored out of her mind, complaining that she only came hoping to spot a real magician. Her maid warns her that a dark magician has been spotted lately, and that monsters just tore through a caravan in the nearby forest. Serene doesn't even blink. She just says she's singing one song and getting out. But the second she steps on stage, before she can sing a single note, monsters start smashing through the windows behind her. The crowd scatters in a full-blown panic, and out of nowhere, a stranger in black throws himself between Serene and the monsters, tearing through them with terrifying precision. Monster blood splatters across Serene's face and she stares at this guy like she's looking at a god, because she recognizes the uniform. This is the Dark Mage from a place called Opian, the legend everyone's been whispering about. Once the dust settles, he walks up and asks if she's hurt. She says she's fine, and then this supposedly terrifying legendary hero asks her for something. Not her hand in marriage, not a reward, nothing dramatic. He just really wants her autograph. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about our actual main character. His name is Rudd. Everyone else calls him Blow when he's wearing this disguise, this glamorous adult form he slips into using a spell called Awakening. Underneath all that intimidating black cloth is a kid who genuinely hates crowds, hates attention, and desperately wants to be left alone. On his way out of the palace, a girl named Ren catches him and says he's needed back at headquarters. Turns out he's got a report to file with his boss, the head of the Opian organization, a man Rudd simply calls the Master. And Ren accidentally drops some paperwork on the ground. Rudd picks it up, glances at it, and freezes. It's an advertisement for the Dark Mage's autograph services. His boss has been secretly turning him into a celebrity brand without telling him a single thing. Rudd storms into the Master's office absolutely furious, slamming the door so hard the man nearly spills his drink. The Master, completely unbothered, rips the evidence to shreds and pretends he has no idea what Rudd is talking about. Rudd is done being polite. He's sick of getting sent on humiliating missions dressed up as important work, chasing lost puppies, delivering love letters, all under the label of official Opian business. The Master just laughs it off, delighted that Rudd somehow managed to score Serene's autograph in the middle of a monster attack. This is the dynamic you need to lock in right now. The Dark Mage, this legend feared across the kingdom, is basically an underpaid intern getting bossed around by a guy who thinks everything is hilarious. But here's where it gets serious. The Master reveals that since that first big rescue, powerful magicians have started watching Rudd closely, including someone from a rival organization called the Association, someone actively hunting him down. Things are about to get a lot more dangerous and the Master knows it. Then he pulls out one more piece of paper, something he's been holding back, something he suspects will make Rudd lose his mind. It's an acceptance letter to Helios, the most elite magic school in the entire kingdom, addressed to a 15-year-old student named Rudd Christie. Rudd has no idea this letter even exists yet, but it's already been sitting on that desk, quietly waiting to blow up his entire life. First though, there's an actual mission on the table. A massive auction where rare and priceless magical items go under the hammer once a year. This time the crown jewel is a magic stone called the Heart of Shajar, one of the rarest and most powerful stones in existence. The real job isn't stealing it though. The Master wants revenge on a specific man, a con artist named Dan Marshall, magical name Cloak, a former member of a destroyed criminal group who once ruined an innocent client's entire life and walked away with barely a slap on the wrist. The plan is simple and absolutely ridiculous. Find Cloak in the crowd, catch him and pull down his pants. Apparently his old gang used to brand its members with an untraceable magic mark on their legs, and if Rudd exposes it in front of the entire auction hall, that's the revenge. Public humiliation. Served ice cold. Rudd is furious about the assignment, but somehow ends up going through with it anyway. The auction floor is packed, aristocrats and magicians rubbing elbows, everyone eyeing the heart of Shajar like it's the last treasure on earth. Rudd, disguised as Blow, scans the crowd looking for his target, and he can feel that something about tonight already smells wrong. Sitting in one of the private boxes is a mysterious swordsman named Shik Mu-an, a magician from the rival association who happens to have a very personal history with Blow. And the second the auction officially opens, chaos detonates. Armed kidnappers storm the stage, hold a blade to the auctioneer's throat, and declare the heart of Shajar theirs. A wolf-eared magician steps in to stop them, and it turns out he's a hunting dog from the association too, nicknamed the Lenost Hound. Before anyone can regain control, the stone vanishes from the stage entirely, and there's Shik Mu-an, standing on top of a giant statue, casually holding the priceless magic stone like it's a snack. He looks straight at Blow's box and dares him to come take it back. Lady Tessiana, a mysterious blue-eyed noblewoman, crashes the statue down just to force her way into the auction, and Shikman turns his attention on her instead. Their fight rips the entire building apart, and in the middle of all that destruction, Blow finally spots his actual target, a man with distinctive piercings standing next to a woman in the crowd. Cloak. Blow moves in fast, disarms him with a few brutal strikes and pins him down, demanding he expose that mark. Cloak swears he has nothing to do with the old gang, but his panic says otherwise. Then Shik Mu-an grabs Blow by the collar with an eerie little grin and says, "Hello, Blackie." Their collision sends a shockwave tearing through the entire hall. The ceiling starts cracking apart above hundreds of terrified guests. Blow knows he doesn't actually want to fight Shik Mu-an, he just wants the mission done and out. But Shik Mu-an has clearly been hunting for this exact rematch for a long time. And then in the middle of all this madness, something even stranger happens. Every ounce of magical power in the room just vanishes, like someone hit a switch. Strange magic circles bloom across the floor, and monsters start crawling straight out of them. Nobody, not Blow, not Shik Mu-an, not the hunting dog Lacoste, has ever heard of a summoning circle this powerful showing up in the middle of a city. Blow realizes he doesn't have time to finish his petty revenge mission anymore. People are actually in danger now. He starts clearing civilians out, while Ren scrambles to activate a teleportation scroll to get them both out of this collapsing building. Just before they vanish, a stranger crushes a fallen magic circle in his bare palm from somewhere far away, unimpressed by the entire spectacle. A cold-horned girl beside him crushes the actual heart of Shajar like it's worthless, calling humans pathetic little creatures. Whoever these two are, they clearly orchestrated tonight's chaos just to watch the fallout. And that means somewhere out there, something far bigger than one greedy conman is quietly setting pieces in motion. Back at Opian, the master admits this whole case stinks of something much darker than a simple robbery. Mass summoning. Missing magic. A mysterious high-grade stone bait. None of it adds up to a coincidence. And that's exactly the moment he finally drops the bomb he's been sitting on. Because that acceptance letter to Helios isn't just paperwork anymore. It's about to become Rudd's next impossible mission. And this time he's not going in wearing his handsome adult disguise. The real client behind all this is Duchess Archon, one of the most powerful noblewomen in the Empire, and she personally travels to Opian to beg for help. Her second son, admitted to Helios just a month earlier, is being tormented by the entire student body. They call him a monster. The Duchess is explained grew up overshadowed and neglected, starved of attention his whole life. And now some cruel rumor at school has turned him into an outcast overnight. She doesn't want gold. She doesn't want justice. She wants someone to walk into that school and simply protect her son. And Rudd, horrified, realizes the master has already enrolled him. Not as Blow the legendary Dark Mage, but as an ordinary 15-year-old freshman named Rudd Christie. He storms out, quits on the spot, threatens to walk away from Opian forever. And within minutes, he's back on the couch listening to Ren explain that it's already done, so he might as well just accept it. The catch is brutal. At Helios, nobody can know he's an actual awakened magician. He has to play a sickly, late-enrolling nobody with zero powers, all while quietly investigating why a duke's son is being tortured by his entire class. Rudd digs through the case file and lands on one photograph, a cold, sharp-eyed boy named Chevla von Hidalgo. Turns out the Hidalgo and Artian families have been feuding for generations, and this kid is apparently the mastermind behind the bullying campaign. Meanwhile at the post office, Rudd crosses paths with a little boy named Ben, who's desperate to mail letters to his big sister at Helios. Rudd quietly uses his fake student credentials to help the letters get through, a small kindness that's going to matter a lot more later than anyone expects. On his first morning at Helios, the entire classroom goes dead silent the moment a long-haired student sits and takes his seat without a word. Someone whispers, "Monster." That's Ledorsis, the Duke's second son, sitting completely alone while the rest of the class treats him like he's radioactive. Red watches quietly, refusing to jump in yet. He wants to understand exactly what he's dealing with before he makes his move. A cheerful classmate named Ledorsis latches onto him immediately, dead last in class rankings, endlessly warm, and totally starved for a friend. Dio gives him the unofficial survival guide to Helios. Rule number 1, never cross the elite Herae's class, the top-tier students with skills so rare they're treated like royalty. Rule number 2, avoid Shevla von Hidalgo at all costs, heir to a powerful noble house, and apparently the reason Ledorsis' entire life has become a nightmare. Rud asks the obvious question. What actually happened to earn Ledorsis that nickname? Dio explains that a month ago, something happened in the library. Rumors say Ledorsis transformed into a horrifying three-eyed, fur-covered creature right in front of witnesses, and the library got shut down for days afterward. Something clearly happened. Nobody knows exactly what. That night, Rud tracks down Ledorsis and finds him fast asleep in their shared dorm room, having refused to talk to him or even acknowledge his existence the entire day. The next morning, a gang of upperclassmen corners Ledorsis in the courtyard, shoving him to the ground, stepping on his hand, mocking him for being abandoned even by his own family. Nobody dares to intervene. Then a heavy book drops out of nowhere and cracks one of the bullies right in the skull. Rud drops down from the wall, casually apologizes for mistaking someone's head for the floor, and takes out 3 separate bullies without breaking a sweat. Ledorsis stares at him in complete shock and then bolts, screaming at him not to come near him again. Rud lets him go, but he's more convinced than ever that something deeply strange is going on beneath the surface of this whole situation. Dio drags him aside in a panic, begging him to switch dorm rooms immediately, because staying close to Ledorsis means becoming a target too, and Dio has seen exactly what that costs. Rud refuses flat out. He's not the kind of person who abandons someone just because it's inconvenient, and from that moment, 3 outcasts start sitting together in class, Ledorsis, Rud and Dio, drawing stares from the entire room. A senior student named Manon corners Rud in private, warning him to distance himself from that monster before he ends up losing everything. Rud calmly clarifies that this wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat, and he's not exactly the type to back down from threat. Rud tracks down Ledorsis at the Western Storage Warehouse, chases him down across the entire campus rooftops and finally corners him after Ledorsis starts hurling charged stones at him in a panic. That's when Shevla shows up with his crew, standing right below them, watching Ledorsis with pure contempt. Ledorsis begs Rud to leave, terrified of what might happen if they're seen together. Shevla mocks Rud openly, calling him nothing but a low-ranked freshman with no business getting involved. Rud, completely unbothered, effortlessly knocks Shevla clean off the railing without even looking like he's trying. Furious and humiliated, Shevla grabs a stranger's magic stone and starts channeling an illusion spell straight into Ledorsis' mind. And that's when we get our first real glimpse of the trauma buried inside Ledorsis. A little golden-haired girl appears in his memory, blood on her face, a monster looming behind her. Ledorsis begs for it to stop and Shevla just keeps pushing deeper, calling it a punishment he deserves. Rud slams an elbow into Shevla, knocking him out cold before things can escalate any further. A professor arrives just in time, and Rud fakes unconsciousness to avoid blowing his cover, but internally he's putting the pieces together fast. Because whatever happened between these 2 boys, it clearly runs a lot deeper than simple schoolyard cruelty. That night, Rud finally gets Ledorsis to sit and talk, offering him candy and asking flat out why Shevla calls him a monster. Ledorsis shuts down completely, insisting he really is a monster and that's just how it is. Meanwhile, Shevla's assistant Anna reports back to him about Rud's suspicious background, a mysterious dude who somehow scored perfect on the entrance exam despite arriving a month late due to illness. Shevla dismisses it, but he decides to escalate anyway, sending a strange black smoke drifting across the school grounds under cover of darkness. The master tells Rud over their private magic line that the Hidalgo and Artian families have been locked in a bitter feud for generations, most likely tied to something Ledorsis did or something that was done to him. He warns Rud not to lose himself this mission and to actually try enjoying his time at school. Rud isn't buying the innocent advice for a second, but he agrees to keep watching a little longer before making his next move. And elsewhere, in a strange house perched on a sea cliff, a suspicious pair named Ruby Montier and her companion Elzebel receive a report confirming their infiltration of Helios Academy went exactly according to plan. Whatever they're planning, it's already deep inside these school walls, and nobody there has any idea. The next morning, Dio hands Rud a notebook packed with names, Students powerful enough to potentially counter Shevla's massive influence. At the top of the list, Princess Utarna, the imperial family's only representative at Helios, feared and untouchable. Second, Lapis, heir to a powerful duchy, someone who despises Shevla but hasn't been able to rank up due to weak practical skills. Before they can act on any of it, students from the treasure tier class barge into the classroom, announcing a surprise practical training session. Everyone gets herded toward a lecture hall, and Ledorsis, conveniently, is nowhere to be found. Turns out Manon has already dragged him off, soaked him with water, and set an ambush in motion, all disguised as an official school assignment. Students file into the auditorium only to find the actual professor missing, replaced by a room full of smirking upperclassmen. Manon announces the real lesson. Everyone will be tested on activating manospheres, using Ledorsis, chained to a target, as their live target practice. The room falls into stunned silence. This isn't training. This is public torture dressed up in a professor's authority. One terrified girl gets bullied into throwing first and fails to even reach the stage. A senior student steps up next and lands a direct hit on Ledorsis's head, and the crowd cheers his technique like it's a sporting event. Then a hand rises in the back of the room. It's Rudd. He steps up, takes a sphere, and blasts a massive hole clean through the target, missing Ledorsis by a hair. The entire hall goes dead silent. Rudd calmly apologizes for missing and asks for a second sphere, this one cracking apart and shattering just from the raw power he channels into it. He picks up a third, warns Ledorsis to move if he doesn't want to get hit, and launches it directly at the terrified upperclassman running the show instead. And just like that, this fake training exercise turns into a one-man riot. Rudd walks through the crowd of bullies like they're paper, dodging spheres, dropping them one by one, coldly counting off each victory like he's ticking boxes on a grocery list. Manon, panicking, demands everyone attack Rudd at once, but even that fails spectacularly. And in the middle of the chaos, Ledorsis suddenly steps in front of the crowd of terrified freshers, taking hit after hit meant for other people, shielding total strangers with his own body. A green-haired girl named Rin bursts into tears, apologizing to him, finally realizing how badly they've all failed him. Rudd stands alone on the stage against Manon and his last two lackeys, calmly walking forward, asking with a sweet smile if they'd like to continue. He looks Manon dead in the eyes and tells him the truth nobody wanted to say out loud. The real monster in this room was never Ledorsis. It was always the people who ganged up on someone helpless just because they could get away with it. A blinding sphere comes flying out of nowhere and drops Manon cold, and the room turns to see who threw it. Professor Rowell, the same terrifying blue-eyed magician Rudd fought during the auction disaster, now revealed to be a Helios instructor hiding in plain sight. She stares straight at Rudd with a look that says she remembers exactly who he is, and Rudd realizes his cover just got dramatically more complicated. Other professors rush in, discover the wrecked training hall littered with unconscious upperclassmen, and order everyone back to class immediately. Professor Rowell doesn't say a word about what she really saw, but her eyes never leave Rudd. Later, Shevla gets summoned by Professor Hale, who reveals he's fully aware of Shevla's involvement, and rather than punishing him, quietly offers him a deal. An upcoming field training trip is coming up, and Hale hints there's an opportunity there for Shevla to show everyone exactly what he's capable of. That night, black smoke seeps through a crack in Rudd and Ledorsis's window while they sleep. It coalesces into a shadowy figure that whispers a chilling promise. This will happen soon before dissolving before Rudd can even grab it. Rudd's blood runs cold because this face looked eerily, disturbingly familiar. The next morning, Ledorsis has changed just slightly. He waits for Rudd instead of running from him, greets classmates back when they say hello, even lets Rin cut his hair as a fresh start. The transformation stuns the whole class. And genuinely, for the first time since arriving, students start walking up to Ledorsis to thank him for protecting them during the Manosphere disaster. It looks for a moment like this story might actually be turning a corner, but the master warns Rudd that something dark is stirring inside Helios itself, and every clue keeps pointing back to that one unanswered question. What exactly happened to Ledorsis a month ago in that library, and who is still hunting him because of it? Field training day finally arrives, and the entire Poliers school buzzes with excitement about the massive teleportation circle that will send Eden's freshmen straight into the tower for real combat exercises. Dio's practically vibrating with nerves, terrified of the danger, but thrilled that they'll actually get to see the tower up close. A handful of elite Hoorays seniors get assigned as chaperones for the trip, and one name jumps straight off the list. Shevla von Hidalgo. Rudd immediately smells a setup. Professor Hale insists he specifically requested Shevla for this assignment, claiming he sees real potential in him. The school director isn't fully convinced, but signs off on it anyway, unaware she's just handed a traitor exactly what he wanted. The massive teleportation hall fills with excited students, staring up at a magic stone bigger than anything they've ever seen. Rudd examines the surrounding formulas and immediately senses something's wrong. This circle is layered with far more complexity than a simple travel spell requires. And then it happens. A thick black haze coalesces above the central stone, twisting into the exact same shadowy figure that visited Rudd's room days earlier. Streams of black smoke pour into the hall, and the doors slam shut, locking everyone inside. Professor Khan activates a barrier, but the black entity shrugs it off entirely. Professor Rowell reveals her true magical name, Tessiana, and steps directly into the entity's path to buy everyone time. Black water starts gushing out of the teleportation circle itself, flooding the hall, and Rudd realizes with horror exactly what it means. Anyone touched by that water gets forcibly pulled straight into the teleportation stream. He screams for everyone to grab on and hold tight, but the black tide is simply too fast. One by one, his classmates get swept away, her friend Dio, until only Ledorsis remains standing beside him. And that's when the shadowy voice inside Ledorsis's head returns, whispering that everything happening tonight is his fault, that he's the reason people around him keep suffering, that monsters like him should never have been born. Rudd activates his true form, becoming Blow right there in front of Ledorsis, no more hiding. He drives his spear straight through the shadow entity's chest before it can drag Ledorsis away too. The creature dissolves into smoke, admitting through gritted teeth that it doesn't even fully understand what it is or who's controlling it. And then in a heartbeat, it's gone. And so is Ledorsis, pulled into the circle before Blow can stop it. The hall doors finally crash open, and a wave of professors bursts in only to find the room completely, terrifyingly empty. Every single student has vanished without a trace, scattered somewhere far, far beyond the safety of Helios. Lapis wakes up alone in a strange, unfamiliar forest, his head pounding. No idea where he is or how he got there. He staggers to his feet screaming for the princess and for Professor Rowell, but nothing answers except the wind. Blow himself wakes up somewhere just as strange, staring at a blood-red sky and twisted black trees, and his stump drops. He recognizes this place from old records. Ishuela, the Cursed Lands, a place the tower sealed off decades ago, supposedly completely devoid of monsters. Except right now he's surrounded by a pack of them. Every single student from Helios has just been dumped into the one place on the entire map that's not supposed to exist anymore. Lapis, running for his life from a snarling monster, remembers something bizarre from before he ever left home. His attendant Runa carved a protective spell straight onto his chest, capable of saving his life exactly 3 times in an emergency. With absolutely nothing left to lose, he turns to face the monster head-on and screams for the magic to activate. Elsewhere, Linus and Cyndia stumble across a mountain of monster corpses, all freshly slain, and realize someone insanely powerful is already moving through this cursed wasteland. That someone is Blow, quietly clearing a path, while desperately trying to reach the master through his cracked communication stone. When contact finally connects, the master is horrified to learn exactly where his star student has landed. Ishuela isn't just cursed, it's completely isolated by a tower-erected barrier, a place where monsters are physically supposed to be impossible, and yet here they are, crawling through the black trees by the dozen. Blow explains that whoever engineered this teleportation trap is clearly hunting Ledorsis specifically, and this can't possibly be some random act of chaos. It's an assassination attempt, disguised as a training accident. Lapis, Linus, and Cyndia stumble straight into Blow moments later, and Lapis instantly recognizes him from that chaotic night at the auction. Blow decides there's no point hiding anymore, not while these kids need protection to survive. He charges their weapons with his own mana, clears the surrounding monsters in seconds, and sets off searching for the rest of the missing students. Meanwhile, Chevla and Dio wake up together, and Dio's just praying Rudd shows up soon to save them both. Instead, Professor Hale finds them first, playing the concerned rescuer perfectly, claiming he was attacked by a mysterious man in black before waking up here too. It's a flawless performance, and nobody in that forest has the slightest idea he's the one who orchestrated this entire nightmare. Tessiana, still in her Professor Rowell disguise, fights off a massive monster while protecting the princess and Professor Khan, confirming they really have landed in Ishuela against every law of nature. Professor Hale leads Chevla and Dio through the wilderness, claiming he's tracking the rest of the group using a locator spell, when really he's steering them exactly where he wants them. Blow, meanwhile, keeps cutting through monster after monster, protecting Lapis, Linus, and Cyndia while quietly scanning the horrifying sign of Ledorsis. He senses a familiar mana signature nearby and realizes Tessiana is close, fighting off her own monster horde with the princess in tow. Professor Khan finally recognizes Blow as the same opium magician who saved lives at the auction, and relief wash over the surviving students. If the legendary Dark Mage is here, maybe, just maybe, they actually stand a chance of surviving this. But Blow's mind is somewhere else entirely, because whoever's orchestrating this disaster clearly wants Ledorsis isolated and unprotected. And right now Ledorsis is nowhere to be found. Rin and her friend hide from a passing monster among a cluster of rocks, terrified, alone, with no idea where the rest of their classmates have scattered to. Just before the monster finds them, a massive blue dragon swoops down from the sky and rips it apart with a single devastating strike. Rin stares in stunned disbelief as the dragon circles once above them before vanishing into the horizon, leaving behind more questions than answers. Blow's path gets blocked by a towering cliff face, and he pauses, calculating whether it's worth the climb, when a strange man with mismatched, multicolored eyes suddenly appears in his way. The stranger asks almost playfully where exactly he thinks he's going. Blow doesn't waste time on pleasantries and slams him with a mana sphere strike, demanding answers about who's really behind this attack. The stranger, cryptic and unbothered, hints that whoever's pulling the strings up on that rising cliff, full of trapped students, is planning to kill every single one of them. And soon, because up on that same rising cliff, Professor Hale has finally dropped the act completely. He hoists Dio by the throat in front of the entire group of terrified freshmen and declares, flatly, that useless people don't deserve to keep living. Shevla screams at him to stop, and Hale's response is to hurl Dio straight off the edge of the cliff without a hint of hesitation. Ledorsis lunges at Hale in a blind rage and gets thrown aside just as easily. The students watch in absolute horror as their trusted teacher reveals himself for exactly what he really is. A monster wearing a human face this entire time. Cyndia unleashes a devastating attack that shatters an approaching stone golem, and everyone realizes the power surging through her weapon is the exact same energy the Black Mage charged into it earlier. It's the first real proof that Blow's power might actually be strong enough to turn the tide of this entire nightmare, if he can just get here in time. Blow, still tearing through the strange multicolored-eyed man for answers, feels a sudden spike of dread crawl up his spine. Something terrible is happening at the top of that cliff, and every second he wastes here is a second closer to losing everything. Professor Hale drags Shevla into a column of forced mana, siphoning his power without consent, using him as a battery for whatever comes next. Two massive wolves made of pure mana materialize beside Hale, and he announces the true purpose of today's lesson. Shevla is going to fight for his life, and everyone else's lives depend on how well he does it. While Shevla's mind spirals under Hale's control, memories surface, flashbacks of a childhood he's spent years trying to bury. A young Shevla meeting Ledorsis for the very first time at the Archon estate, his little sister Ibriel instantly adoring the quiet, withdrawn boy. The three of them becoming close, sneaking away to play together, forming a bond that had nothing to do with feuding families or noble titles. And then, the memory that shattered everything. A garden full of beautiful flowers, Ibriel picking blossoms while black smoke thickens unnoticed above her head. An explosion. A monster tearing out of nowhere, and Ledorsis left standing alone, powerless to save the girl he loved like family. The official story that spread afterward blamed a random attacker with a grudge against the Archon family, but somehow Ledorsis walked away without a single scratch. And that detail alone was enough to turn public opinion against him forever. Shevla's own brother-in-arms, Ledorsis' older sibling, whispered the poison first, calling him a monster, warning Shevla to stay far away. And Shevla, drowning in grief, believed every word of it. Back in the present, mana-fueled wolves lunge toward the terrified crowd of freshmen, and everyone scrambles in blind panic, refusing to just wait around and die, grabs a mana sphere and prepares to fight back. But Ledorsis suddenly steps in front of her, shielding her from the monster's claws. She screams at him, furious, insisting his death would change absolutely nothing, that sacrificing himself is meaningless, just like it was meaningless when Dio fell. Professor Hale watches, delighted, calling it fascinating that Isle's containment spells are actually working against monsters this powerful, which means these creatures aren't illusions at all, they're horrifyingly real. One brave student rallies the panicking crowd, reminding everyone that becoming real magicians means facing exactly this kind of danger. And if they run now, they'll never survive what's coming later. Students start grabbing weapons, refusing to just lie down and accept death. And Professor Hale, mildly impressed but running out of patience, decides it's finally time to stop playing games. He drops his human disguise entirely, revealing a monstrous, demonic true form underneath, declaring the feeling of transcending human limits absolutely magnificent. He asks the terrified crowd how they'd prefer to die, one by one, or all at once, and states plainly he's going to enjoy the process either way. Ledorsis grabs Shevla's hand at the very last second as Hale hurls him off the cliff, and refuses, absolutely refuses, to let go. The magic stone strapped to Chevla's chest suddenly cracks, snapping him out of Hale's mind control, just enough for him to realize the sheer terror of dangling above a deadly fall. Professor Hale, delighted by this unexpected turn, offers Ledorsis a truly cruel choice. Let go of Chevla's hand, and the rest of the students live. Hold on, and every single one of them dies with him. Chevla screams at him to just let go already, calling himself worthless, insisting he doesn't deserve to be saved by the very person he's tormented for months. But Ledorsis remembers something else entirely, a memory of his sister Ibriel, confessing that despite everything, she loved her brother more than anyone in the world, and that she desperately wished the two people she cared about most could actually become friends. Ledorsis holds on tighter. He doesn't let go, and that's the exact moment he remembers something Rudd once told him, that no matter what happens, if Ledorsis ever calls for help, Rudd will come running. So he screams the only name he can think of, and somewhere far below that crumbling cliff, Blow finally hears it. Blow explodes onto the scene in a burst of lightning-fast motion, hurling Chevla clear of the collapsing rock face and shattering the falling boulders into harmless dust, before they can crush a single student. Professor Hale, absolutely stunned, demands to know who exactly is standing in front of him, and when Blow calmly confirms he's the Dark Mage from Opian, the entire crowd of terrified students erupts, because if the legend himself has arrived, maybe they're actually going to survive this after all. Blow and the demonic version of Professor Hale clash with earth-shattering force. Their battle, tearing the surrounding cliffside apart. Hale insists that the mana coursing through him now is unlike anything a normal human should ever be able to wield. But Blow, unfazed, points out that raw power means nothing without the skill to actually control it. Hale's blood runs an unnatural shade of blue, and Blow's suspicions harden into certainty. This creature isn't human at all, and someone, somewhere, deliberately handed him this kind of power. Just as Blow's about to force an answer out of him, a massive blue dragon plunges out of the sky, sinks its jaws around the demonic professor, and hauls him away into the distance before anyone can stop it. Blow's left frustrated, watching his one real lead vanish into the clouds, but the students around him don't share his frustration at all. All they see is the legendary Dark Mage, standing tall, having just saved every single one of their lives. A rescue portal finally tears open behind them, and Professor Khan and Professor Roel step through, flooded with relief to find survivors waiting. Blow quietly slips away before anyone can ask too many questions, but not before Ledorsis calls out his name one more time, stunned that this legendary stranger somehow already knew who he was. Elsewhere, Marquis Hidalgo and a squad of tower mages come tearing through their own portal, desperate to find Chevla, and they discover the collapsing rock formation with a full-scale rescue operation, already improvised on the fly. The plan is simple and terrifying: let the entire mass of Earth crumble apart, then catch every falling student out of the open air using coordinated levitation magic. It somehow miraculously works. Every student drifts safely down through the sky like they've suddenly grown wings. And Blow, back in his true, exhausted form of Rudd, manages to catch Chevla and Ledorsis both before they hit the ground. Rudd looks down at Ledorsis, unconscious in his arms, and quietly admits to himself that calling out his real name in front of Chevla was a mistake he's going to have to deal with eventually. But right now that's a problem for later. Every single student against all odds has survived Ishuela. A search party of Tower Rangers combs the surrounding wasteland, and eventually recovers Professor Hale's abandoned body. And one grim detail confirms everyone's worst suspicion. His blood runs blue. Whatever he really was, he was never remotely human. Back at Helios, the fallout is immediate and brutal. Parents, council members, and the Duchess Archon herself demand answers. And the school is forced to admit publicly they cannot handle the fallout of this catastrophe alone. The tower agrees to open a full investigation. And a new instructor, a mage named Orfal, arrives to quietly dig through everything connected to Professor Hale's true identity. Meanwhile, back at the association headquarters, a man named Lenasti reads the reports with far too much interest, and decides to send his own agent into Helios to sniff around personally. That agent happens to be Shik Mu'an, the very same rival swordsman who's been fixated on hunting down the Dark Mage since that chaotic night at the auction. And when word reaches him that the Dark Mage might have been spotted near Helios, his eyes light up with something close to pure, obsessive delight. A giant welcome-back party gets thrown for the surviving students, an attempt to bury the trauma of Ishuela under happy memories and celebration. Rin gives Ledorsis a fresh haircut, and when he walks into the party hall looking completely transformed, the entire room goes quiet in stunned disbelief. Rose petals rain down from above, orchestrated by Rudd as a small, unnecessary flourish. And for one shining moment, Ledorsis actually looks like just another happy student enjoying a party. Nothing more. Nothing less. But not everyone is celebrating. A sharp-eyed classmate named Eel corners Rudd privately, revealing something she's been quietly piecing together ever since the cliff collapsed. She swears she saw something coming off of Ledorsis' own body that night. Something dark. Something that felt an awful lot like black magic. Right before the dark mage suddenly appeared to save them. Rudd plays it off calmly, but internally the pieces are refusing to line up cleanly. Because if Ledorsis really is connected to whatever's hunting him, that changes absolutely everything about this mission. That night, driven by a nagging unease he can't shake, Rudd checks Ledorsis' chest for any hidden mark while he sleeps, searching for some kind of proof. He finds nothing conclusive, just a strange, lingering sense that something invisible is still clinging to this boy. Something neither of them fully understands yet. Duchess Archon, still terrified for her son's safety, demands round-the-clock protection be arranged, quietly. Without alerting the tower or drawing more unwanted attention to Ledorsis, the master agrees to keep Rudd stationed at Helios indefinitely, at least until they can figure out exactly who orchestrated the Ishuela disaster and why they wanted Ledorsis dead so badly. Shik Mu-an arrives at Helios under a forged identity, forced by Lenaste to pose as an ordinary Karaskla student, and he hates every single second of the disguise. But buried underneath his irritation is something sharper, a hunter's instinct that tells him the dark mage is closer than he's ever been before. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure with mismatched eyes reports back to Ruby Montier, confirming that their little experiment inside Helios has drawn exactly the kind of attention they wanted. Whatever these two are actually planning, this failed assassination attempt on Ledorsis was never the finish line. It was only the opening move. Professor Orfel begins his quiet investigation, questioning students, cross-referencing incidents, trying to determine exactly how deep Professor Hale's corruption actually ran through the school. He runs straight into Professor Rowell, hovering suspiciously close to Rudd once again, warning her sharply that she needs to back off and stop drawing attention to one specific freshman. Rowell, unbothered, simply says she admires him, an answer that satisfies absolutely nobody. Rudd breathes a sigh of relief once the awkward standoff ends, fully aware that between Isle's growing suspicions, Rowell's unnerving fixation, and now an investigator from the tower crawling around campus, his cover is thinner than it's ever been. And somewhere out there, wearing a stolen student uniform, walks a man who spent months trying to hunt him down for a single rematch. Rudd finds himself standing at the center of a dangerous web. A duke's traumatized son who might be connected to something far darker than schoolyard bullying. A rival swordsman closing in. A demonic professor's mysterious ally still out there scheming. And somewhere above it all, a giant blue dragon that saved lives twice without ever explaining why. For a school that's supposed to be an elite institution shaping the Empire's next generation of heroes, Helios is starting to feel a whole lot more like a battlefield in disguise. The morning after the party, life at Helios almost feels normal again. Students laughing in the courtyard. Gossip about the new professor. The usual noise of teenage life. Almost. Because underneath all that surface calm, three separate threats are converging on this school at exactly the same time. Shik Mu-an, wearing his forced disguise, wandering the halls hunting for a fight he's obsessed with finishing. Ruby Montier's shadowy network, still embedded somewhere inside these walls after their failed attempt on Ledorsis. And Professor Orfal, methodically pulling threads that lead uncomfortably close to Rudd's carefully guarded secret. Shevla, meanwhile, hasn't spoken more than a handful of words since the cliffside incident, spending most of his time staring blankly at nothing, clutching the cracked magic stone that once controlled him. Anna watches him with growing worry, knowing full well that whatever guilt he's carrying isn't going away just because Hale is gone. Ledorsis crosses paths with Shevla in a quiet corridor, the two of them locking eyes for a long, silent moment, years of pain hanging heavy between them. Neither one says anything meaningful, not yet. But for the first time, neither of them looks away either. A small crack in years of hatred. And cracks, once they start, have a habit of spreading. Rudd watches this quiet exchange from a distance and allows himself a small, cautious flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the worst of the damage between these two boys is finally starting to heal. But peace never lasts long in this story, because Isle, sharper than anyone gives her credit for, keeps circling back to the same unsettling conclusion. Something dark lives inside Ledorsis, something that surfaced the moment Shevla was about to die, and vanished the instant the dark mage arrived. She corners Rudd again, dead serious this time, asking flat out if he's noticed anything strange about his own roommate. Rudd deflects, but he can't shake the same nagging suspicion clawing at the back of his own mind. What if the black shadow haunting Ledorsis' nightmares isn't just a memory of trauma? What if it's something still very much alive, hiding inside him, waiting? Meanwhile, Professor Orfal digs deeper into Hale's records and discovers something deeply disturbing. Evidence that Hale had been quietly manipulating school infrastructure for months, long before that teleportation trap was ever set. Someone helped him. Someone with access. Someone still walking these halls right now, hiding in plain sight. The tower assigns additional security to Helios, and rumors spread fast that another investigator from the association is on the way. Someone with a reputation for finding exactly what people are desperate to hide. Rudd realizes the walls are closing in from every direction, and sooner or later one of these threats is going to force his hand completely. Shik-Muan finally corners a student in Karis uniform he suspects might have connections to the Dark Mage, but comes up empty. Growing more and more restless with every passing day he doesn't get his rematch. His obsession is starting to draw attention from professors who have absolutely no idea he's not actually enrolled here. Late one night, Rudd sits on the rooftop again, trying to reach the master, desperate for guidance on how to handle a situation that keeps spiraling further out of his control. The connection crackles to life, and the master's voice, for once, sounds genuinely serious instead of teasing. He tells Rudd that Duchess Ardian has quietly requested full-time protection be extended indefinitely, that whatever attacked Ledorsis and Ishuela is nowhere near finished, and that Rudd needs to stay sharp, stay close, and trust absolutely no one outside their small circle. Rudd asks the one question that's been eating at him since that night on the cliff. Does the master know what that black shadow entity actually was? There's a long pause on the other end before the master finally admits he has a theory, but not enough evidence yet to say it out loud. Whatever secrets are buried in Ledorsis's past, they run far deeper than anyone at Opian originally realized, deep enough that even the master is being cautious with what he shares. Rudd decides then and there that regardless of what dark truth might be waiting underneath all of this, his mission hasn't changed one bit: protect Ledorsis. Whatever he is, whatever's hunting him, whatever secret is still buried inside that library incident, nobody will talk about. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just another mission from Opian. Ledorsis became someone Rudd actually cares about, monster rumors and all. Back in class, Ledorsis surprises everyone by actually raising his hand to answer a question, something he hasn't done once since arriving at Helios. The classroom, still adjusting to this new version of him, breaks into quiet, genuine applause when he gets it right. Rin beams from across the room, proud of the boy she once was too terrified to even look in the eye. Small moments like these are exactly what this whole mission was supposed to protect. Ordinary teenage happiness, the kind Ledorsis never got to experience before Rudd showed up. Dio, ever the loyal friend, insists they celebrate properly with food, and drags both Rudd and Ledorsis toward the dining hall, chattering excitedly about absolutely nothing important. For a brief, fragile window, it almost feels like everything might actually turn out okay. But danger in this story never announces itself politely, because somewhere outside Helios's walls, Ruby Montier reads a fresh report and smiles with quiet, chilling satisfaction. Their agent inside the school succeeded far better than expected, not in killing Ledorsis, but in exposing exactly how much protection surrounds him now. And knowing your enemy's defenses in her world is worth infinitely more than one failed assassination attempt. Somewhere far from campus, the strange man with mismatched eyes lounges near a cave entrance, casually reporting that whatever they're really after is still sitting untouched inside Helios. He mentions, almost as an afterthought, that the Dark Mage showing up to interfere was an unexpected complication, one Ruby Montier clearly hadn't fully accounted for, which means Rudd, without even realizing it, just made himself a much bigger target too. Marquis Hidalgo, humiliated by his son's near-death experience, launches his own private investigation running parallel to the tower's official inquiry. He owes the Dark Mage a debt now, and men like the Marquis don't let debts like that go unpaid. Word starts spreading through the noble circles that whoever this mysterious Opian magician really is, he's earned himself some very powerful allies, whether he wanted them or not. Back at Helios, Professor Orfal calls a private meeting with Professor Rowell and Professor Khan, laying out everything the investigation has uncovered so far. Hale wasn't acting alone. Someone helped mask his true nature from the school's detection wards for months. And whoever that accomplice is, they're still walking these halls completely undetected. The tower quietly increases security around specific students they now consider high-priority targets, and Ledorsis's name sits right at the very top of that list. Rudd realizes his job just became infinitely harder. Not only does he need to protect Ledorsis from whatever's hunting him, now he needs to protect his own secret identity from an official investigation actively closing in around him. And somewhere in the shadows, Shik-Muan, still disguised, still hunting, finally catches a whiff of something that makes his instincts scream. A trace of black magic residue, faint but unmistakable, the exact same signature he's chased halfway across the empire. He follows it straight toward the one place he never expected to find it. Right here, hidden somewhere inside Helios's own walls. Shevla finally works up the courage to approach Ledorsis directly. No illusions. No cruelty. Just two boys standing awkwardly in an empty hallway. Years of pain hanging thick in the silence between them. He doesn't apologize. Not exactly. But he asks quietly if Ledorsis remembers the flowers in the hyacinth garden. And for the first time in years, Ledorsis actually smiles at him, small, fragile, but real. Two boys who lost the same person, who blamed themselves in completely different ways, finally standing on the same side of a wound that never should have separated them in the first place. Rudd watches this reconciliation unfold from a distance and feels something settle in his chest, a quiet satisfaction that no mission report could ever fully capture. This is exactly what the Duchess asked for when she begged Opian for help. Not just protection from physical danger, but a chance for her son to feel like a person again, instead of a monster everyone fears. But peace, as always in this story, comes with a shelf life, because that same night, the strange black shadow returns to Ledorsis's dreams, whispering, quieter this time, but no less menacing. It tells him the danger isn't over. It tells him something is still coming for him, and this time it warns, there won't be a dark mage close enough to save him. Ledorsis wakes up drenched in sweat, and for the first time since the party, he doesn't wake Rudd to talk about it. He just lies there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, carrying the weight of a warning he's too afraid to share. Meanwhile, Isle corners Rudd one final time, laying every single piece of evidence out on the table. The black energy she saw, the timing of the dark mage's arrival, the fact that Ledorsis somehow walked away from a monster attack years ago completely unharmed. She asked Rudd directly, is Ledorsis connected to whatever's hunting him, or is he somehow the actual source of it? Rudd, for once, doesn't have a clever deflection ready, because deep down he's been asking himself the exact same terrifying question. Shikmuan finally traces the black magic residue to its source. Standing outside the very dormitory, Rudd and Ledorsis, a slow, hungry grin spreading across his face. He's finally found what he's been hunting, and this time, he has absolutely no intention of letting it slip away again. The tower's investigation quietly confirms what everyone feared. Professor Hale wasn't some rogue demon acting alone. He was part of something far larger. Something organized. Something patient. And whatever that something is, it clearly considers Ledorsis important enough to burn down an entire school's teleportation system just to get to him. Rudd realizes he can't keep piecing this together from the shadows anymore. Sooner or later, he's going to have to choose between protecting his secret and protecting the truth. And he already knows which one actually matters. Back on that cliff in Ishuela, in the chaos and adrenaline of the fight, Rudd made Ledorsis a promise without even fully realizing it. That no matter what happens, no matter what secret is buried inside him, Rudd isn't going anywhere. And for a boy who's spent his entire life being abandoned, called a monster, and left to face his nightmares completely alone, that promise means more than any noble title or magical power ever could. Ledorsis finally decides to tell Rudd everything he remembers about that night in the library, the night everything changed. He describes waking up in a haze, surrounded by broken furniture, with absolutely no memory of what happened in between. Just fragments, flashes of black smoke and terrified screaming. Rudd listens carefully, piecing it together with everything the shadow entity has said, everything Isle witnessed, everything the master hasn't been willing to explain outright. And a horrifying theory starts forming in his mind, one he desperately hopes isn't true. What if something attached itself to Ledorsis that night? Something that's been lying dormant inside him ever since, waking only under extreme stress, only when his life is genuinely on the line. What if the black shadow hunting him isn't hunting him at all? What if it's trying to reclaim something it considers rightfully its own? Rudd doesn't share this theory with Ledorsis, not yet, not until he has actual proof instead of terrifying speculation. Instead, he makes a quiet, private vow to himself. Whatever Ledorsis is, whatever's living inside him, it doesn't change anything about who Rudd has decided to protect. He reports everything back to the master, laying out every piece of the puzzle in careful, precise detail. Goes uncharacteristically silent slant for a long moment before finally admitting the truth he's been sitting on. There are old forbidden records buried deep in Opian's archives about entities exactly like the one described. Ancient things sealed away long before the current magical system even existed. If his suspicion is correct, Ledorsis isn't just a target. He might be a vessel, and vessels historically attract exactly the kind of dangerous attention that nearly got an entire school of children killed in Ishuela. Rudd absorbs this information like a punch to the gut, but his resolve doesn't waver for even a second. If anything, it hardens. Because now more than ever, Ledorsis needs someone in his corner who isn't going to run screaming at the first sign of something ancient and terrifying lurking beneath the surface. The master promises to dig deeper into the old records quietly, carefully, without alerting the tower or the association to exactly how much Opian already suspects. Because if word gets out that Duke Artian's second son might be carrying something dangerous, or worse, something valuable, every faction in the Empire is going to come crawling out of the woodwork, wanting a piece of him. Rudd understands, without needing to be told twice, that protecting Ledorsis just became infinitely more complicated than surviving one traitorous professor and his monster army. This is bigger than Helios. Bigger than the feud between two noble families. Bigger possibly than anyone in this story currently understands. Shevla, working through his own guilt in real time, starts spending more time around Ledorsis and Rudd. Awkward at first, stiff, unpracticed, but genuine. Years of poisoned assumptions don't dissolve overnight. But every shared meal, every small conversation, chips away a little more at the wall he built out of grief and misplaced blame. Anna watches this shift with quiet relief, glad to see the boy she's protected for years finally start putting down a weight he never should have carried alone. Dio, thrilled to have his friend group expanding instead of shrinking, immediately starts scheming ways for all four of them to sit together at every meal from now on. Rudd allows himself a rare moment of genuine warmth watching this unlikely little family form out of tragedy and misunderstanding. For a mission that started as a favor to a desperate mother, it's turned into something he never expected to actually care about this much. But even as friendships mend, the investigation into Professor Hale's true origins keeps circling back to one uncomfortable truth. Someone inside Helios helped hide him for months. Professor Orfall narrows his suspect list, and every single name on it belongs to a staff member with unrestricted access to the school's deepest magical infrastructure, which means whoever helped Hale orchestrate the Ishuila disaster is still walking these halls, still teaching classes, still smiling politely at students who have absolutely no idea what they're really looking at. Shik Muan, having finally traced the source of that black magic residue directly to Rudd's dormitory, decides to bide his time rather than charge in recklessly. He's chased this rematch for months, and he's not about to let impatience blow his one real chance at finally settling the score. Instead, he watches from a distance, studying patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to force a confrontation nobody at Helios will be able to ignore. Meanwhile, Ruby Montier's network continues gathering intelligence, patient, methodical, treating the entire school like a chessboard, where every student is just another piece to be moved or sacrificed. Rudd senses the net tightening from every direction, and he knows, deep down, that whatever comes next is going to force every single secret in this story out into the open, whether anyone's ready for it or not. For now though, there's something quietly beautiful happening inside these school walls. A boy once called a monster by everyone who knew him is slowly, carefully, learning what it feels like to be surrounded, that by people who actually care whether he lives or dies. And that, more than any prophecy about vessels or ancient sealed entities, might end up being the thing that saves him in the end. A few weeks pass, and life at Helios settles into something resembling normal again, or at least as normal as it can get, with a demon-hunting investigation quietly running in the background. Rudd keeps splitting his time between class, protecting Ledorsis, and dodging both IL's relentless suspicion and Professor Rowell's unsettling attention. Somehow, against all odds, he's still managing to keep his cover mostly intact. Shevla, in a move that shocks half the Karis class, publicly apologizes to Ledorsis in front of the entire courtyard, admitting out loud that the monster rumors were built entirely on his own grief and cruelty. The reaction ripples through the school instantly. If the boy who started the whole nightmare is finally standing beside Ledorsis, instead of tormenting him, maybe the rest of Helios can finally let this go too. Students who once crossed the hallway to avoid Ledorsis start greeting him normally, some even hesitantly asking if he wants to study together or join them for lunch. It's not instant and it's not universal, but the tide is undeniably turning, and Ledorsis slowly, cautiously, starts letting himself believe that maybe this version of his life, one where people don't flinch when they see him, might actually be real. Duchess Archon receives regular updates from the master, and with each report, her worry softens just slightly, replaced by something she hasn't felt about her second son in a very long time. Hope. She writes a letter to Rudd directly, thanking him for something no amount of gold could ever properly repay, giving her son back his smile. Rudd reads it late one night on the rooftop and feels something tighten in his chest that has absolutely nothing to do with magic or missions. This is the part of the job nobody warned him about when he first got dragged into this assignment, kicking and screaming. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being work entirely. But the calm doesn't hold forever, because Professor Orfal finally narrows his investigation down to a single name. Someone with deep enough access to the school's core wards to have shielded Hale's true nature for months without triggering a single alarm. He requests an emergency meeting with the school director, refusing to say the name out loud until he has absolute proof, because if he's wrong, he'll destroy an innocent person's career and reputation. And if he's right, Helios has an even bigger problem sitting right under its nose than anyone previously realized. Shik Muan, tired of watching from the shadows, finally makes his move. He corners Rudd alone in a quiet corridor late one evening, dropping the Karis disguise entirely, letting his real aura flood the hallway with unmistakable pressure. He doesn't bother with pleasantries. He simply says he's been waiting a very long time for this, and he's not leaving until he finally gets his rematch. Rudd realizes, with a heavy sigh, that his carefully maintained secret identity is about to become a lot harder to protect, because Shik Muan isn't the type to walk away quietly, and a fight between the two of them inside Helios's walls is guaranteed to draw exactly the kind of attention Rudd has spent months desperately avoiding. Before either of them can throw a single punch, an alarm rings out across the entire campus, sharp, urgent, unmistakable. A breach has been detected somewhere near the eastern wing of the school. Shik Muan's expression shifts instantly from bloodthirsty anticipation to sharp, focused alertness. Whatever's happening, it just interrupted the fight he's been chasing for months, and neither of them can afford to ignore it. They both take off running toward the source of the alarm, an uneasy temporary truce forming without either of them ever saying a word about it out loud. Because whatever just breached Helios's defenses, it clearly isn't something either of them wants to face alone. Students pour out of dormitories in a panic, professors scrambling to organize a response, and right in the middle of the eastern courtyard, a familiar figure stands waiting. The strange man with mismatched, multicolored eyes, the same one Rudd fought back in Ishuela, standing calmly in the middle of Helios's own campus like he owns the place. He smiles almost lazily and says he's simply come to collect what belongs to his mistress, and his gaze lands directly, unmistakably, on Ledorsis. Ledorsis freezes, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his feet refuse to move. Rudd sprints toward the courtyard, and Shik Muan, curious despite himself, follows close behind, unwilling to miss whatever this turns out to be. The stranger introduces himself finally as Elsable, servant of Ruby Montier, and he explains, almost casually, that they've been watching this school for a very long time, waiting patiently for the right moment. He claims Ledorsis carries something that never should have ended up in a human body, something ancient, something his mistress considers rightfully hers. Rudd steps directly between Elsable and Ledorsis, spear already crackling with mana, refusing to let this creature get anywhere near the boy he's spent months protecting. Elsable studies him with mild amusement, remarking that the dark mage really is persistent, showing up uninvited to ruin their plans not once, but apparently twice now. Shik Muan, sensing an opportunity, steps forward as well, deciding that whatever's happening here, it's clearly more interesting than a personal grudge match. Elsable, faced with two extremely powerful magicians instead of one, sighs dramatically and admits this complicates things more than he'd hoped. But he assures them this is only a preview, a scouting mission, nothing more. His mistress will come herself when the time is right, and no amount of dark mages or rival swordsmen will be enough to stop her. With that chilling promise hanging in the air, he dissolves into shadow and vanishes, leaving behind nothing but a courtyard full of terrified students and far more questions than answers. Professor Orfal arrives moments too late, furious that whoever this intruder was managed to slip in and out of Helios's supposedly ironclad defenses without triggering a single containment ward. It confirms his worst fear. Someone on the inside really is helping outside forces move freely through this school. Ledorsis, shaking, finally turns to Rudd and asks the question he's been too afraid to voice for weeks. What exactly is he? Why does everything dangerous in this world seem to want him specifically? Rudd doesn't have a clean, comforting answer, but he grabs Ledorsis by the shoulders and tells him the one thing he knows with absolute certainty. Whatever he is, whatever ancient thing might be tangled up inside him, it doesn't change who Ledorsis actually is as a person. And Rudd isn't going anywhere, no matter how many shadowy servants or mysterious mistresses come crawling out of the dark to try and take him. Shik Muan, watching this exchange with unexpected quiet, finally lowers his guard just slightly. He tells Rudd almost begrudgingly that their rematch can wait, because whatever's coming for this school, it sounds like it's going to take more than two rival magicians settling old scores to survive it. The master, briefed immediately on everything that happened, goes uncharacteristically serious over their communication line. He confirms what he's suspected for weeks now, that Ruby Montier isn't just some random villain causing chaos for entertainment. She's after something specific, something ancient, something sealed away long before recorded history, and Ledorsis has somehow become tangled up in the middle of it. Duchess Archon, informed of the breach, arrives at Helios personally within hours, demanding to see her son with her own eyes, refusing to trust secondhand reports any longer. When she finds him alive, shaken but standing, surrounded by friends who clearly refuse to abandon him, something in her expression softens with relief so profound it nearly brings her to tears. She pulls Rudd aside privately and asks him, mother to protect her, whether her son is truly safe here. Rudd doesn't lie to her. He tells her the danger is far from over, that whatever's hunting Ledorsis is patient, powerful, and clearly not finished yet. But he also promises, with a certainty that surprises even himself, that as long as he's breathing, nothing is getting through him to reach her son. The Duchess studies him for a long moment, before finally nodding, satisfied not because the danger is gone, but because she finally believes someone actually means it when they say they'll protect him. Professor Orfall finally reveals his findings to the school director in a closed-door meeting, laying out evidence of a staff member who's been quietly sabotaging security wards for months. The investigation is far from over, but the walls are finally closing in on whoever helped orchestrate this entire nightmare from the shadows. Shevla, standing beside Ledorsis in the aftermath of the courtyard chaos, quietly vows that whatever he's not running away from this fight either. Not this time. Not after everything it took to finally rebuild the friendship he thought he'd lost forever. Dio, terrified but stubbornly refusing to leave his friend's side, declares that if monsters and mysterious cloaked servants are officially part of their lives now, someone needs to teach him actual combat magic. Immediately, Rin quietly reaches for Ledorsis' hand, a small simple gesture that says more than any grand speech ever could. Whatever's coming, he's not facing it alone anymore, and that single truth might end up mattering more than any ancient prophecy or hidden power. In the days that follow, Helios begins the slow difficult process of picking itself back up. Repair crews patch the shattered training hall. Professors quietly rewrite lesson plans that no longer trust a single unverified staff member, and the entire student body carries a new, sobering awareness that the world outside these walls is far more dangerous than any of them realized. But something remarkable has happened underneath all that fear. A community that once turned its back on one terrified, grieving boy has slowly, imperfectly, learned how to stand beside him instead. Ledorsis walks through the courtyard now without flinching at every whispered word behind him, because those whispers have finally stopped meaning what they used to. Shevla sits with him at lunch most days, their friendship rebuilt on honesty instead of buried grief, a bond that Ibriel, wherever she is, would surely be proud to see. Dio, Rin, and I'll round out a small, fiercely loyal circle, 4 students who've been through fire together and came out the other side unwilling to let each other fall again. Rudd watches all of this unfold from just close enough to protect, but far enough to let Ledorsis actually live his own life for once. Because that, more than any grand act of heroism, was always the real assignment. Not just keeping Ledorsis alive, but giving him back the ordinary, precious things every other student took for granted. Friendship, laughter, a place where he belonged. Professor Orfall's investigation continues quietly in the background, closing in on the conspirator who helped Hale hide in plain sight for so long. It's not finished yet, not by a long shot, but the pressure is mounting, and whoever's still hiding inside these walls, their time is running out. Shik Mu'an lingers around Helios a little longer than his mission technically requires, telling himself it's purely professional curiosity, though everyone who's seen him watching Rudd from a distance knows exactly what it really is. A rivalry that's slowly, almost against his will, starting to look a lot like respect. Elzebsel's warning still hangs over the entire school like a storm cloud that hasn't broken yet. Ruby Montier is out there somewhere, patient, powerful, and absolutely convinced that whatever's inside Ledorsis belongs to her. That threat hasn't gone away, not even close. But for the first time since this entire nightmare began, Ledorsis doesn't have to face it as some isolated, friendless target. He's got Rudd beside him, disguised protector and genuine friend rolled into one exhausted teenager pretending to be an ordinary freshman. He's got Shevla, finally free of years of misplaced guilt, standing as an ally instead of a tormentor. He's got Dio, Rin, and I'll, 3 people who refuse to look away from him, no matter what dark magic or mysterious enemies come crawling out of the shadows. And somewhere above the clouds, a giant blue dragon that saved lives twice without asking for anything in return. A mystery still waiting to be solved. The Master, back at Opian, closes his old, dusty archive of forbidden records with a heavy sigh, knowing full well this story is nowhere near finished. But he also allows himself a small, genuine smile, because for once, The mission he sent his star student on accomplished something far more meaningful than he'd originally planned. Ren teases him gently, pointing out that maybe forcing Rudd into that ridiculous acceptance letter wasn't such a terrible idea after all. The master just laughs and admits that sometimes, the best missions are the ones that turn into something nobody could have predicted. Duchess Archon returns home, with a quiet, tearful gratitude that she carries for the rest of her life, knowing her son finally has a fighting chance at happiness that no amount of noble titles could ever buy him. And back in Helios's shared dormitory, on an ordinary, uneventful evening, Rudd and Ledorsis sit together in comfortable silence, no shadows lurking in the corners, no monsters clawing at the windows. Ledorsis finally asks the question that's been sitting quietly between them for weeks. Why did Rudd bother with all of this? Chasing him across rooftops, taking hits meant for total strangers, sticking around through every terrifying, exhausting disaster. Rudd shrugs, in that casual, deflecting way he always does when something actually matters to him, and says it started as a mission. But somewhere along the way, watching Ledorsis learn how to smile again, watching him hold onto Chevla's hand instead of letting go, watching an entire school of frightened teenagers rediscover what it means to actually stand together. It stopped being just a job. Ledorsis, quiet for a long moment, finally says the two words he never thought he'd be able to say to anyone again. Thank you. And Rudd, uncomfortable with sincerity as always, just grins and tells him to save the thanks for when he actually figures out what's living inside his own chest. Because that mystery is still out there, patient, dangerous, and absolutely refusing to stay buried forever. Somewhere in a house perched on a windswept cliff, Ruby Montier reads the latest report from her failed SCF mission and doesn't panic, doesn't even flinch. She simply smiles, calm and unhurried, and says that patience is the one weapon humans consistently underestimate. Whatever she wants from Ledorsis, she's willing to wait for it, and that patience alone should terrify everyone who cares about him. But for now, for this one, hard-won moment, Helios is safe. Ledorsis is surrounded by people who actually see him, and the Dark Mage, whether he ever fully admits it out loud or not, has found something worth protecting far beyond any mission report or paycheck. A family built entirely out of the wreckage of a bullying campaign, a demonic professor's betrayal, and a cursed land nobody was ever supposed to survive. Because sometimes, the strongest bonds in this world aren't formed in peace and comfort. They're forged in exactly the kind of chaos this story just put every single one of these kids through, and come out the other side stronger for it. The next morning, sunlight pours across the Helios courtyard, and for the first time in what feels like forever, nobody's running from monsters. Nobody's whispering behind anyone's back. Nobody's hiding a secret so heavy it threatens to crush them. Just students, laughing, complaining about homework, living exactly the kind of ordinary life every single one of them nearly lost. Ledorsis walks through that courtyard with his head held high, the sun catching his newly cut hair, and nobody, not a single person, whispers the word monster. Chevla walks beside him, and somewhere behind them Rindio and I'll trail along, bickering cheerfully about nothing important at all, and a few steps back, watching quietly, disguised as just another exhausted, unremarkable freshman, walks the boy everyone in this empire fears as the legendary Dark Mage. Rudd never wanted this mission. He fought it, complained about it, tried desperately to quit before it even began, but somewhere between rooftop chases, collapsing cliffs, and a boy who finally learned how to smile again, it became something he'd fight to protect with everything he has. Because that's the truth this whole story has been building toward from the very first hook. The scariest, most powerful magician in the entire kingdom isn't dangerous because of the monsters he's slain or the legends built around his name. He's dangerous because he refuses to let a single person he's decided to protect ever fall, no matter what ancient horrors come crawling out of the dark to try. Ruby Montier is still out there. The traitor still hiding inside Helios hasn't been caught yet. Shikmuan still hasn't gotten his rematch. And whatever's actually sealed inside Ledorsis remains a mystery even the master hasn't fully cracked. But none of that changes the one truth this entire story has proven, over and over again, through every disaster, every betrayal, every impossible fight against impossible odds. A boy once abandoned by everyone who was supposed to love him, found people willing to catch him when he fell, quite literally, out of the sky itself. And a legendary hero who never wanted the title, discovered that the missions worth fighting for were never the flashy ones. The auctions, the monster hunts, the demon-slaying glory. They were the quiet ones. Sitting beside a scared lonely kid at lunch when nobody else would. Chasing him across rooftops just to prove he wasn't giving up. Refusing to let go, even when the entire world told him it would be easier that way. Ledorsis learned that being different doesn't automatically mean being a monster. Shevla learned that grief, left unchecked, can turn even the kindest heart into something cruel, and that healing is always possible if you're brave enough to try. Rudd learned that even the most reluctant hero eventually finds a reason worth fighting for, one that has absolutely nothing to do with fame, or autographs, or a legendary reputation he never asked for in the first place. And somewhere out there, past the safety of Helios's walls, a much bigger story is still unfolding. Ancient entities, sealed secrets, a mysterious mistress with patience as sharp as any weapon, and a friendship strong enough to hold the line against whatever comes next. But for right now, in this exact moment, that's a battle for another day. Because right now, a group of kids who survived a nightmare together are simply walking to class, complaining about their next exam, laughing at a joke that doesn't matter to anyone outside their little circle, and that more than any prophecy, more than any powerful magic, is the real victory this entire story fought so hard to earn. Ordinary happiness, hard won, and finally, deservedly real. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is just getting started. There's a traitor still hiding somewhere inside Helios, a rival swordsman circling closer every single day, and a villain patient enough to wait as long as it takes to get what she wants. But every single time this story knocked its characters down, they got back up, together, stronger, and refusing to let each other fight alone. That's the heartbeat underneath every twist, every betrayal, every impossible cliffside rescue. Not the power of the Dark Mage's spear, not the mystery buried inside Ledorsis, but the simple, stubborn refusal of a handful of broken, lonely kids to give up on each other. Rudd never asked to become anyone's hero. He never wanted the fame, the autographs, the legend that grew around a name he barely even recognizes as his own anymore. All he ever really wanted was to finish his mission and go home. But somewhere along the way, home stopped being a place, and started being the people who needed him most. A traumatized boy who flinched at his own reflection. A guilt-ridden noble who lost the one person who ever truly loved him. A scattered group of freshmen who learned, the hardest way imaginable, exactly what it costs to stand up for someone the whole world had already given up on. Ledorsis was never a monster. He was a scared, grieving kid who needed exactly one person to look past the rumors and see him for who he actually was. And when that one person finally showed up, disguised, reluctant, and completely unwilling to admit how much he actually cared, everything started to change. So the next time somebody calls you a monster, remember Ledorsis, standing tall in that courtyard, sunlight in his hair, surrounded by people who finally, truly see him. Remember that sometimes the scariest legend in the entire kingdom is really just a tired kid who refuses to let anyone he loves fall, even when the whole world tells him to let go. Remember that healing isn't instant, that it takes rooftop chases and shattered manospheres and one impossibly stubborn act of holding on when everything says to let go. This story started with a question that never got a clean answer. Was that first light from the sky really a savior, or something wearing a very convincing disguise? And maybe, by the end of it all, the answers doesn't actually matter as much as what people choose to do with the power they're given. Because Rudd could have used his strength for glory, for fame, for exactly the kind of legendary reputation everyone already assumed he wanted. Instead, he used it to sit beside a broken kid at lunch, to chase him across rooftops, to hold the line against monsters, traitors, and ancient horrors alike. That's the real magic this story was always about. Not the spells, not the awakening, not the spear crackling with mana in the dark. Just one person deciding that somebody else's life was worth protecting, no matter the cost, no matter how many times the world told him to walk away. A dark mage, a duke's forgotten son, and a friendship strong enough to hold back an empire's worth of nightmares. That's the story this whole journey was building toward, one impossible rescue at a time. And in the end, that quiet, stubborn choice to never let go turned out to be the most powerful magic of all.